Mr. Ebright, you are now muted.
Sam did that to you. You muted you?
It wasn't me.
Yeah. All right. So yesterday we talked about functions of the political parties. Hopefully you saw the video. We looked at why we're stuck in the two-party system. Okay? And hopefully that explained a lot to you, just kind of understanding, and the big part, a couple big parts, we don't use the parliamentary system, we use the presidential system, where you have to have a majority rather than a plurality. Okay? And this whole thing about winner take all of each state. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're looking at, if you guys look at page 63 in your book, if you have it, we start talking about minor parties. Where's my thing? Start talking about minor parties. Okay. And there's 4 types of minor parties. How many? 4. Okay. Did you name 2? No. Okay, well, you will be able to after this, right? Okay, so the list on page 63 is kind of interesting. Now, this is a little bit dated, but a lot of these, the ones at the bottom, are regional or local parties on page 63. The ones at the top are third parties that have actually had candidates on the national ticket in enough states to win enough electoral college votes to become president. Okay, sometimes these third parties don't get on every state's ballot for president. Okay, but if you got on in California, New York, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, you could do enough where you wouldn't have to be on the ballot in, say, Wyoming to get elected president. Okay, you just got to get to 270. Okay, the Reform Party there, you guys see that? That one's kind of interesting. In 1992, there was a billionaire oil guy out of Texas named Ross Perot, and he ran for president for the Reform Party. All right, he got 19% of the popular vote. How many electors do you think he won? 0. Okay, that just kind of reinforces this idea that third parties, okay, and so by winning 19% of the vote, he definitely took votes from the other candidates. You know what I mean? And that affects the outcome of the election. Okay, so that's going to be one of the roles of these minor parties here that we'll talk about later today. So let's say you had the marijuana party. Because if you look at this, you have the marijuana party and you have the pot party. That's because they're regional, okay, or just located within a state. So if we were talking about this in class yesterday, I don't know if it was 4th hour, but somebody said in Oregon, they basically decriminalized drugs, every drug, heroin, cocaine, everything. So they're looking at drug addiction as a disease, not a crime. Okay, so basically, you get treatment rather than jail. Okay, they do this in Portugal. They do this in like Amsterdam, where they just don't have drug laws or they don't enforce drug laws. Okay, because a lot of our drug laws are national laws, especially marijuana is. Okay, so once a party adopts or a state, decriminalizes marijuana, there's no need for a pot party in there anymore, is there? So they come and go. Okay, these minor parties. Okay, but these third parties are kind of long lasting. So let's look at these minor parties and how we can kind of classify them into 4 areas. All right, so ideological, or as George Herbert Walker Bush would say, ideological. All right, these are based on a particular set of beliefs. The most popular today, of course, is the Libertarian Party, and they did have a candidate. I think she was on, Jo Jorgensen was on in all 50 states. Okay, why is this going dark? Okay. So you got Marxist, Socialist, Communist. They rarely win, but they're long-lived. Okay, they last for a long time, all right? So this is ideological. Then you have single issue. And this is what we were just talking about with like the pot party, okay? This usually fades as one of the major parties adopts their beliefs. So I don't know if you remember in 2016, there was a Green Party candidate for president. And there has been in several elections over the last 20, 30 years. Started with Ralph Nader, and then this last time, Jill Stein was her name, okay? And so which party do you think Jill Stein pulls from more, the Democratic Party or the Republican Party? The Democratic Party, right? What about the Libertarian? Kind of had this discussion yesterday. I think Republican, but, you know, just based on the ideas of economic freedom. But as far as social freedom goes, you might have pulled from Democratic voters for things like, you know, decriminalizing drugs. That's something libertarians support. So she might have pulled from some Democrats, some Republicans. I would venture to say more Republicans. Okay. But historically, I don't know if you guys remember some of these parties, the Free Soil Party, the Know Nothing Party. Yeah. You remember those? Is that what? Is that? Oh, okay. Question.
So they decriminalize drugs, right?
Addiction is a disease. That's what they're saying.
Okay, so why don't they try to prevent the disease by making laws?
Like by putting drug dealers in jail? Right. Yeah. I mean, there's some fallacies with the idea, right? I think logically there are some fallacies. Yes.
The evidence for it comes from the fact that drug addiction is not, or I would say dependency is not something that happens on its own. It comes from a lack of something. So there's studies where you take animals and you give them the choice between water with cocaine in it or just straight water. And if they're alone in their cage, they will always OD on cocaine. But if they're in an environment where they can have as much sex as possible, eat as much as possible, socialize as much as possible, and they have no deficit, then they will never choose the cocaine water. So it's an idea that we can use the money, which the vast majority of the money that we spend incarcerating people is for drugs. If we could use that money to create an environment in which drugs are not needed, it would overall decrease the amount of drugs.
Right. And there's a Christian argument to this as well, I think. I mean, I think that in my life, and the experience that I've had in my life, and the people that I know, the people that are the happiest people are those that believe in God. Because that fulfills some of what you're talking about, that lacking. Now, when you talk about an animal and what they need, we need the same thing in many ways, right? We need relationships. We have certain, needs. And if those are fulfilled, then we tend to not turn to alcohol and drugs, right? And if you're a believer in Christ, when sometimes you're lacking in some of those areas, you have somebody to lean on, right? To help you get through those difficult times rather than drugs or alcohol, right? And so I think as we see in our society, as we move away from God, right? Then there's more dependency, there's more drug abuse and so forth. So can government solve this problem by what? More welfare programs so that people basic needs are met? I mean, we can't do that. We can't fix their social lives.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the money spent on incarceration. If we don't have that in our budget, the economy would have more money and be able to flourish more. And I mean, it does sound ridiculous, but
no, it doesn't to me. I mean, it's worthy of a conversation for sure.
But like Portugal, you mentioned, they used to be the #1 most drug dependent country in the entire world. Now they're #2 least.
Okay.
So like, it can sound abstract and non-realistic,
right?
But results have shown that it does work.
Okay. Well, and the thing you got to take into consideration with Portugal, okay, is they tend to be a heterogeneous society. You know what I mean? It's a small population. The people share a common culture. You know, we are a very diverse society with, you know, we have social problems, we have discriminatory problems. But yeah, I am with those that believe that locking people up for minor drug offenses is not probably a good idea. You know, it costs too much and it ruins people's lives and yeah, that's kind of how I fall on that. But I worry about children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the access to these drugs to younger people, and just how easily these drugs are addicted, you know.
No, I haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I didn't know I was off mute.
Yeah, we know.
Can I say one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
And like, I do agree, like, you know, developing minds should not like have access to that sort of thing. But since it's like not a perfect world, I would say that, you know, that's something that you can't control as much as you would like to.
Right.
And so my response to that would be, in order to like have it be available, or at least in order to reduce the availability to young people, I would say the best way to do that would be to decrease the popularity of it.
Right.
And in that case, that would be, you know, decreasing the amount of people that use,
Right.
which that would help.
So I just had this conversation with my son, Jack, okay? So he graduated here 2 years ago, right? And this is when, and I don't know if it's still the case, you guys can tell me, that vaping really became a big thing, right? And he talked, because he told me in high school, when he was a senior, he felt like 75% of the senior class was vaping. And I was like, really? Okay. And as you guys know, nicotine is highly addictive, right? And so we had this conversation. He keeps up with some of his friends from high school and so forth. He goes, yeah, they're all still doing it. They're addicted. And a lot of them are smoking. And then a lot of them are smoking weed. Okay. Which is, you know, something that happens with college kids and, you know, adolescents, it happens. But I mean, just that access is, allows for it to happen. You know what I mean? And I worry about middle school kids having access to pot, just like in these states where it's decriminalized, it just makes it easier. And I've had this conversation with my students before, like it's Friday, you're looking for a joint so that you can smoke it on the weekend. This weekend, is there somebody in the school you could find to get one for this weekend? And pretty much everybody raises their hand. Yes, they know where to get a joint. You know what I mean? Now, is that the same way at St. Francis? Or at Seeds? Probably not as accessible, right? So we don't want our, you know, young people doing that. I don't want my kids doing that. So access, I just worry about, you know, I don't know. I am so torn on this issue.
It's just that like the problem with, there's cost, and also when you're incarcerating a bunch of people who all have the same problem,
Yeah.
then when you go to prison, you just get exposed to more drugs. Like, people don't realize like how much goes on there. And with prison guards being like high rates of corruption,
Yeah.
you know, they smuggle stuff in there. Like, it just sending people to prison is basically exposing them to even more crime than what they were incarcerated
Certainly
for.
criminal behavior, yeah.
Do you think that instead of decriminalizing it, we could just change the punishment
That's
for
what
it?
I was saying. I wasn't saying put them in
Instead
jail,
of just
but
like locking them up? Because like, you know how sometimes you go to court and instead of going to jail, you do community service?
Right.
Instead of them doing community.
Well,
service.
and if you're a first-time offender, that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna get community service and, you know, maybe, what do they call it, 6 months of, not parole, but probation. Okay. First offenders, they treat very, you know, light, with drugs, and a lot of crimes, actually, but, yeah.
But if you get addicted to it, then it's never gonna be
Yeah, and I don't know if pot is so much of an addictive drug. Certainly, it's not as addictive as nicotine, or cocaine or heroin or opioids, which are extremely addictive. Yeah, so I don't know. We got to move on. It's a good conversation and one that's worthy of having. And obviously, a lot of states have decided, especially Oregon now, but they also do think, they support things like euthanasia as well. Okay. Maybe they've been smoking too much pot. I don't know. I'm just kidding. All right. Economic protest. This is pretty interesting. Rooted in economic discontent. Now, this we see a lot. We've seen it in our history. Okay. Usually there's no clear cut or wide range of belief here. They just want better times. So times kind of, as times improve, as the economy improves, these things kind of go away. A couple of historical examples: the Greenback Party, the populist parties. And more recently, I don't know if you guys heard of something called Occupy Wall Street from a few years ago. Kind of an economic protest. And then the Tea Party, which came about, 2009, 2010, where these are mostly conservatives that felt like the government was spending too much money. This is about the time we got Obamacare, okay, and worried about the national budget and, the debt. And so the Tea Party is kind of an economic protest party as well, okay? So they tend to fade away as those have. New ones will pop up and so forth, okay? A splinter party. Now this is pretty interesting, okay? This is where an individual, a person, leads a break from one of the two major parties, okay? Usually they can win local or congressional elections, but will follow an individual, okay? So Teddy Roosevelt's Bull Moose Party. I don't know if you remember the Progressive Party. There was a guy named William La Follette, okay, that led the Progressive Party. And then Wallace, the American Independent Party. Okay, now, I don't know, how many of you guys have ever seen the movie Forrest Gump? Okay, good. So remember the governor that stood in the door at the University of Alabama to prevent the integration of black students into the school? Remember that? I don't know, from the movie. And then the black girl, like, she drops a book and Forrest Gump picks it up and gives it to her. I don't know. Okay. That's George Wallace, okay? And this was 1964, or excuse me, 68, okay? George Wallace was a Democrat because everybody in the South was Democrats in the 60s, okay? And so George Wallace broke from the Democratic Party. He was the governor of Alabama and created the American Independent Party. He won 46 electoral college votes, okay? That's the most any third party party has gotten in the 20th century. I looked through all these elections. Okay, there's a guy named Harry Byrd that got one 15 in 1960. George Wallace got 46 in 1968. Okay, so Wallace was a segregationist. All right, and so a lot of the hardcore Democrat segregationists, your KKK type crowd, supported Wallace, and he won some of these southern states. Okay, he won Alabama, I think Mississippi, South Carolina. I'm not sure about Georgia. Okay, so it does happen on occasion where somebody will, do that. Teddy Roosevelt did that, and it takes, kind of a larger than life character to do something like that. Okay, so that's a splinter party. Okay, and that's kind of your four types of minor parties, right? Now, what's the role of these minor parties? What role do they play in our political process, okay? And this is pretty good. We kind of already talked about this a little bit, is a spoiler in an election. They don't win, but they could cause somebody to lose. And if you go back to Ross Perot, okay? This guy was, CNN used to be the only cable news network. In fact, that's what it's called, cable news network, CNN, okay? And the most popular show at 7 o'clock on on that channel was Larry King Live. Larry King Live is a longtime radio talk show host that went on TV. And his favorite guest in 1991 was Ross Perot. Okay? And people really liked him because he went after both parties. He attacked the Democrats, attacked the Republicans, and people loved him. And he kind of talked like this. He's a Southern Texan, and he said, you know, Larry, we're going to get both parties straight, and we're going to fix this country, okay? And people, 19% of the popular vote, okay? People loved him. Now, the more famous one is Ralph Nader. Well, not really more famous, okay? But you take the state of Florida, okay? And in Florida in 2000, okay, and we're kind of looking at this today with the election results with Trump and Biden. You know, we're looking at, you know, obviously Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan. But in 2000, it came down to Florida. And Ralph Nader got something like 2.6% of the popular vote in Florida. That's the Green Party. So Al Gore was running against George W. Bush. That election came down to less than, say, 2,000 votes in Florida. And whoever won Florida was going to win the election. Did Ralph Nader cost Al Gore the presidency? Many people believe he did by running. Okay? Does that make sense? So that's a spoiler. Okay? Innovator reformer, and this is the great thing about, I really appreciate these third parties. Because a major party says, man, there's a lot of interest in this, say decriminalizing drugs, right? And we'll say one of the major parties says, we're going to adopt that. Then that party no longer, it's served its purpose. You know what I mean? It's innovated, it's reformed a different party and created a situation where they got what they want. Okay? And you could say the same somewhat for the Green Party. You know, has one of the two major parties kind of adopted the Green Party platform? Yeah, I mean, the Democratic Party kind of has, especially the left wing of it, when you get to your AOCs and the Green New Deal folks and so forth. Boy, the Green New Deal probably goes beyond what the Green Party wants. To be honest, I mean, it's a massive change to society. Okay? And then this one. These third parties can help stop disenfranchisement. If you're a person and you're like, I don't like these Republicans, I don't like these Democrats, I'm not going to get involved in the election process. I don't care. I don't like either one of them. Well, if you have a third party, like a Libertarian Party, you may get some more people that generally wouldn't get involved to get involved. Okay? And I want to bring up this guy's name. Okay, this is, I can't see him here, but you've been looking at him. That's Ron Paul. Okay, you know who Ron Paul is? Yeah, he's the father of Rand Paul, who's a senator from Kentucky, but Rand's the dad. And he's an OBGYN. He served in the U.S. Congress representing Texas for, 30 years. He ran for president like 3 times. Okay, he's truly a libertarian, but he ran under the Republican Party banner. Okay, because he knew he didn't have a chance to run as an independent or a third party. But I remember in 2012 when I went, this is where I got the bumper sticker. I went to the Republican caucus. Remember I was talking about the Republican caucus Century 2 in 2016. Well, in 2012, Rand Paul was getting a lot of traction. A lot of people Ron Paul. And I went down to the caucus, and you had all these people that didn't look like your traditional Republicans. You had people with long hair, tattoos, piercings. They were Rand Paul or Ron Paul supporters. Okay, these are libertarian people that are freedom. Okay, and economic freedom, social freedom, all the freedom. And I thought it was pretty cool because it kind of opened up the Republican Party to people that normally wouldn't be Republicans. But the Republican Party shared a lot in common with libertarians at the time. Okay, so it kind of helps with getting more people into the tent. more people interested in the process, okay? That makes sense? That's pretty good stuff, okay? So, although these parties have a hard time trying to win elections, they do impact our political process, okay? All right, now this stuff that's gonna be pretty new to you, okay? And we look at the organization of the political parties. Now, I mentioned the RNC and the DNC in passing yesterday, okay? But when you look at the national parties, you get the Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee. Now, the Libertarian Party has a national committee as well, okay? It's just a lot smaller, all right? So these national committees run the party, okay? And this is how they are organized, all right? So you've got here, the RNC has 100 members at the national level. This is the national committee. One man and one woman from every state, okay? And then Democrats, being a little bit more democratic, if you will, they have male and female chairmen from each state, plus 33 at-large members for the big states, which would be more democratic, okay? So their job, they have two jobs. What? How many jobs? Two jobs. One, run the conventions in election years and raise money, okay? They raise money to educate voters on candidates and issues and so forth, okay? The conventions, if you recall, I said are in August of the election year, okay? And they were done, like I said yesterday, virtually. I don't know if I mentioned that in the video. So the Democrats, it was all done like Zoom, like we're doing right now, okay? Did any of you guys see any? The Democrat one was awful. I mean, it just wasn't well produced. It's hard to produce, right? Republicans had the advantage. They got to watch the Democrats do theirs, and then the following week got to do theirs. So they made some improvements. It was a little bit better optically than the Democrats, okay? I think even Democrats will admit their convention was awful. And then Republicans say, well, ours was better than theirs, which it was, okay? Not that much better, but better, okay? All right, so that's in August. Now, usually they do that in a big city, like in a swing state, and they bring in thousands of Republicans or thousands of Democrats. They're all wearing red, white, and blue, carrying signs. There's all these speeches for 4 days, and they're in charge of running that, okay? They've become decreasingly important over the years. Okay, they used to decide who the candidate was going to be at these elections, but then the party started doing the caucuses and the primaries to choose the candidates, giving the voters a choice. Okay, rather than the party leaders picking the candidates. Does that make sense? So it has become more democratic, and if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you have a say in who your candidates are going to be, rather than the party. Okay, and that's good, I think. That's progress. All right, so that's their major job. Now, each national party has a chairperson. All right, let me give you some names. The head of the DNC is a guy named Tom Perez. Okay, and the head of the RNC is Romney McDaniel. Okay. You can follow these people on Twitter. I do. Okay. So generally, these people, they're in charge of the party. Okay. They serve 4-year terms, usually offset from the presidential cycle. Okay. So Ronna and Tom will be done with their job in 2022. Okay. I think that's how it's still working. They may have changed this, but it's how it's traditionally been, offset, okay? Main job, they have 2 main jobs. How many? 2, okay? You guys know I'm kind of like giving you hints here, right? Like, Name two. Okay. All right. Main job is to win the presidential election or take and maintain control of Congress. Okay. Who won? Tom or Ron? We don't know. One thing's for sure, guys. There was no blue wave and there was no red wave. Okay. Yesterday I took to calling it a cesspool instead of a wave. All right. So neither one of them won. Okay. If you go back to 2016, the RNC chair was a guy named Reince Priebus. He had a really tough job. And Tom Perez had a tough job this year. Right? I mean, the most excited voters for the Democratic Party are those ones that support Bernie Sanders, right? And Elizabeth Warren. They're the ones that are fired up. Well, how do you get those people fired up for Joe Biden? It's hard to do that. Okay. In 2016, guys, the establishment of the Republican Party did not want Donald Trump to be the nominee. They wanted Jeb Bush to be the nominee. That's where all the money was at. Okay, with Jeb Bush. But the voters chose Trump. Okay, the Republican voters. They got excited about this Trump guy. And it brought in a lot of new people to the Republican Party. I mean, it really did. Got a lot of Democrats to vote for a Republican. That's how he won Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Michigan. Okay. So the former RNC chair, Reince Priebus, did a heck of a job to bring the Republican Party together so that Trump could win. Okay. That was difficult to do. Sure. Okay. So sometimes they have a tough job. All right. Their job, win this election, okay, and control of Congress. They try and raise money, create party unity, which can be difficult. Now, so today, if Biden wins, then Joe Biden is the head of the Democratic Party, the leader of the Democratic Party. Okay. If Donald Trump loses, she's the head of the Republican Party. If the president is in power, they kind of cede that power to the president of their party. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Now we look at the states. Okay. And every state has similar setup as the national. Okay. So remember, you have one man and one woman from every state that is the head of the party. So they look over the state parties. Okay. So you have state chairman or chairperson. Okay, mirroring the national level. There's really not a lot different. So I'm just going to move on to local. Okay, and this is the grassroots level. Okay, local organizations. These are local parties. Okay, and yesterday I brought up the Sedgwick County Pachydermy Club, okay, which is the Republican Party of Sedgwick County, and the Democratic Party of Sedgwick County. Okay, you can look these up, Google them. If you're interested in getting involved, like I said yesterday, you can just call them and say, hey, I want to get involved, and they'll find something for you to do. And you get to start meeting people and networking with them, and now you're in. You're part of the network, all right? So at the local level, cities are broken up into wards, okay, which can be defined by, several, really by, I don't know if you go square miles, but wards are bigger than what are called precincts, okay? But the city of Wichita is broken up into wards for city council elections, all right? And we had was that the one that Michael O'Donnell, any of you guys follow that situation? They haven't called the race yet. Between that and Sarah Lopez, I think is her name, and yeah, it's really close. And Michael O'Donnell is the one that got caught scheming against the mayor and stuff like that. It's really scum of the earth type behavior on this guy's part, this Republican. Okay?
Wasn't he gonna resign if he won?
Yeah, he said if he wins, he'll resign because he wanted to hold the seat so the Republican Party would choose a successor for him. So he wanted to hold the seat for the Republican Party. Right? Now, I didn't get to vote for or against him. I was looking for his name. Okay, because I was going to just leave that one blank. I wasn't going to vote for Sarah Lopez, but I wasn't going to vote for him. But it wasn't it wasn't on my ballot. So I didn't live in his ward, I guess, if that makes sense. Yes? Okay. And then precinct is the smallest unit in politics. Okay, this is where, if any of you guys went and voted in person on the day of the election, that's where you live, that's your precinct. Okay. Multiple precincts make up a ward. Usually this is several square blocks is your precinct. All right, so this is just the neighborhoods that you live around you, okay? Now guys, this is where if you really want to change the country, this is where you need to start at the grassroots level, at the precinct level, okay? And I have this in here. This is how the religious right kind of took over the party. This would be going back to the 1990s. And you guys have heard me speak to this idea where like the whole South flipped from Democrat to Republican, okay? As the Democratic Party moved away from what you would call kind of your family values, okay, and started supporting things that may not be very biblical, the Republican Party kind of swooped in and said, hey, we still believe in those values, so vote for us. And so it's dangerous for the Republican Party to become the religious party, okay, because that tent is going to shrink. It's shrinking because the number of religious people are shrinking in this country. So that would be dangerous for the Republicans to do. At the time, in the early 90s, it did help them get to power, okay, at the congressional level, all right? So you're talking about, guys, winning state legislatures, control of state legislatures, city councils, okay? This is how you change the country, okay? And that requires a lot of work by people at the local level, okay? To organize people, get them out to vote for certain ideas and people that represent those ideas, okay? This is what Barack Obama did before he ran for office. He was called a community organizer, okay? And he would teach people in places like Chicago about how to register people to vote and talk to them about issues that were important to them and get them out to vote, okay? That ground game, okay? Now this whole mail-in ballot thing, you know, threw a big major wrench into our political process. And so here we are 10 days after an election, and we still don't know for sure who won. Okay, and a big reason for that is because of how many ballots came in by mail rather than people voting in person, and what the laws were surrounding those ballots. Did you need signature verification? Okay, so states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin has voter ID law like Kansas does. So if you vote in person, you got to show your ID. But there was no verification for mail-in ballots in Wisconsin and no signature verification in many cases, which means that's a violation of the voter ID laws. Okay, so this complicates matters. And this is where these lawsuits come in, guys. Okay, and so we'll see how the courts rule on these. Okay. Now, if you look at the Kansas Supreme Court, which you think is typically a Republican state, a red state, the Kansas Supreme Court is fairly liberal. I don't know if you knew that or not, okay? Because the governor of Kansas gets to choose the Kansas Supreme Court, but they get to choose that Supreme Court justice based on a list of people that the Kansas Bar Association gives the governor to choose from. And the Kansas Bar Association is very liberal. So even if you have a Republican governor, the list of judges that they're going to get to choose from generally are fairly liberal. Okay, so many states are like that. And so the state Supreme Courts in, say, Pennsylvania or Wisconsin are going to be fairly liberal. So if those courts side with Biden, then the response by the Trump team is to appeal that decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay. And as we know today, the Supreme Court at the U.S. level is tilting to the right. Yes? Okay. At least we think. All right. So this is, I mean, if you really want to get involved in politics, this is where you can make great change in your country. Yeah.
Yesterday, when you were talking about voter fraud in Philadelphia,
Mhm.
you said that they could also throw all the votes out.
That is a request to throw them out. I don't know if that is likely to happen. I think you would have a recount and follow the law, like verification, okay? One of the other things that happened in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania is that poll workers were calling individuals that did not have everything filled out on their ballots to come in and fix them. But they weren't calling Republican voters to do that, to fix their ballots.
But
That falls under the Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment, okay? Equal protection under the law, that Republican voters were not getting that equal protection. Yeah.
But couldn't that, since there's more on the ballot than just the president?
Yes.
If there's local elections going on, how would they figure out who won that?
They're gonna have to recount them. You know, and which ballots are legal and which ones are not. But yeah, I mean, if they throw out the ones that they let come in and change, I don't know how this is gonna work. Now, here's an interesting statistic out of Georgia. There were 283,000 ballots that just voted for president and vice president and didn't vote anything else, okay? 97% of those went for Biden. Is that fishy? Like somebody just filled out a bunch of freaking ballots for president, vice president and turned them in? That is fishy and statistically a total anomaly. You know what I mean? Statistically, if you're flipping a coin, how many times it lands on heads and tails? You know what I mean? It can't happen. That's fishy. That needs to be looked into. Where did these ballots come from? You know what I mean? Again, like I said yesterday, I don't know, guys. I mean, there's fraud. Everybody, I mean, with any common sense knows there's fraud. Is it widespread enough to change this election? I don't know. And even whether we'll find out. But I know one thing for sure. If we don't fix this, we're going to be looking at the same thing 2 years from now in the congressional midterm elections. Okay? And when people don't trust the system, it's just not healthy for the country. You know what I mean? And you're polling the country right now. About 60% of Americans don't feel like this election was trustworthy. So that's going to include some Democrats. You have 60%.
Is it possible to do a full countrywide revote?
A revote? No. I don't think they can do a revote. I mean, maybe.
That would take way too much money.
Yeah, what's money? We're just printing it anyways, right? Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah. Right. I don't know.
Have a good weekend, Mr.
You do. Take care.